Thomas Blake stood alone in the grand hall of the United Galactic Assembly, the polished marble floors reflecting the soft lighting from the vaulted ceiling. Tall columns, adorned with intricate carvings depicting the history of interstellar diplomacy, stretched towards the heavens, emphasizing the hall's majesty. The silence was profound, amplifying the anticipation that hung in the air. His tailored suit was impeccable, his demeanor calm, masking the weight of the responsibilities he carried. As he surveyed the room, he marveled at the architectural masterpiece that symbolized unity among the stars. Suddenly, the sound of a soft melodic voice broke the stillness. "Thomas, what does it feel like to kiss?" He turned to see Aria, the shy alien diplomat from Zareth, standing at the entrance. Her presence was striking, her silvery skin shimmering under the ambient light, eyes a captivating swirl of blue and silver. She moved gracefully, her robe flowing like liquid silk around her shoulders. Thomas blinked, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected question. "Aria, that's quite a personal question," he replied, his voice warm and welcoming. "Why do you ask?" Aria's expression was a mix of curiosity and contemplation. In Zareth, emotions are considered illogical, and physical expressions of affection are rare. "I have been reading about human cultures and find myself intrigued by your concept of love and physical affection." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Well, love is indeed complex. It's a deep, emotional connection that involves care, trust, and a desire for the other person's happiness. Kissing, for instance, is a way to connect with someone on a deeper level, expressing affection and closeness that words alone cannot convey." Aria listened intently, her eyes reflecting a profound curiosity. "In my culture, relationships are based on compatibility and mutual benefit. The depth of emotion you describe is foreign to us. I want to understand it better to see if it can help bridge our cultural differences." Thomas appreciated her sincerity. Understanding each other's emotions can indeed foster stronger bonds. "It's fascinating to hear about your culture's perspective. Perhaps through sharing our experiences, we can find common ground." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Several diplomats entered the hall, each bringing their own agendas and perspectives. The atmosphere shifted as the room began to fill with representatives from various species, all preparing for the crucial negotiations ahead. As the assembly commenced, Thomas and Aria took their seats, their earlier conversation lingering in the back of their minds. The agenda focused on resource allocation, a topic that had recently caused significant tensions between Earth and Zareth. Voices rose and fell as diplomats presented their arguments, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Thomas found his thoughts drifting back to Aria's question. Her curiosity about human emotions was a refreshing change from the often cold and calculated nature of interstellar diplomacy. It was a reminder that beneath the political posturing, they were all sentient beings seeking connection and understanding. During a break, Thomas found Aria again. "I hope our discussion hasn't caused you any trouble with your colleagues," he said, concerned about the potential backlash from her curiosity. Aria smiled softly. "Zorak did warn me, but I believe it's important to explore these differences. Understanding human emotions might provide new insights into our negotiations." Thomas nodded, feeling a growing respect for her willingness to challenge her cultural norms. "It's brave of you to seek understanding in this way. If there's anything more you'd like to know, feel free to ask." Aria's eyes brightened. "Thank you, Thomas. Your openness means a lot. Perhaps we could continue our conversation after the session?" "Of course," Thomas agreed, feeling a sense of anticipation. "I look forward to it." The assembly resumed, and Thomas and Aria focused on the task at hand. The discussions were intense, with delegates debating the merits of various proposals. Thomas noticed how Aria's newfound insights into human emotions seemed to influence her approach. She advocated for solutions that considered not just logical outcomes, but also the well-being of all parties involved. As the session drew to a close, a tentative agreement was reached. There was a palpable sense of relief, but Thomas knew that the real work was just beginning. He looked forward to his continued interactions with Aria, believing that their personal connection could play a crucial role in the diplomatic process. Later, as the hall emptied, Thomas and Aria found a quiet corner to resume their conversation. "You mentioned earlier that physical expressions of affection are rare in your culture," Thomas began. Have you ever experienced anything like what we discussed? Arya shook her head. No, our interactions are primarily formal, but I want to understand more, to see if such expressions can help us connect on a deeper level. Thomas smiled, admiring her determination. Well, Arya, I think you're already on the right path. Understanding each other's cultures and emotions is the first step towards true diplomacy. Arya's gaze was steady, her voice soft. Thank you, Thomas. I feel that this understanding might be the key to not just our negotiations, but also to bridging the gap between our worlds. Thomas Blake sat across from Arya in a quiet corner of the grand hall, the air filled with the subtle hum of diplomatic murmurs and the distant rustle of ceremonial robes. Arya's silver eyes sparkled with curiosity, a stark contrast to the stoic expressions of her fellow Zarethians. Her voice, soft yet insistent, broke the silence. Thomas, in my culture, emotions are seen as irrational. They are controlled, suppressed. How do humans embrace such unpredictability? Thomas leaned back, considering his words carefully. Emotions are a fundamental part of being human, Arya. They can be chaotic, but they also bring depth and meaning to our lives. Love, joy, sorrow, they all contribute to our experiences and decisions. Arya nodded, her brow furrowing slightly. But does that not lead to conflict? How do you manage the volatility? Thomas smiled, recognizing the genuine curiosity in her question. It's true, emotions can lead to misunderstandings and conflict. But they also drive empathy, compassion, and connection. They motivate us to overcome challenges and seek harmony. Their conversation was interrupted by a stern voice. Blake, a word? It was Ambassador Kincaid, his superior, who eyed Arya warily. Thomas stood, excusing himself. I'll be right back, Arya. He followed Kincaid a few steps away. Be careful with how much you share, Kincaid warned. We can't afford to let personal interests interfere with our diplomatic duties. Thomas nodded, understanding the caution but feeling a twinge of defiance. I know what I'm doing, sir. Returning to Arya, Thomas found her lost in thought, her slender fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the table. Sorry about that. Where were we? Arya looked up, her expression softer. You were explaining how emotions can create connections. Tell me more about this. Love. How does it influence your actions? Thomas hesitated, then decided to dive deeper. Love is complex. It's an intense feeling of deep affection for someone, and it can be romantic, familial, or platonic. It influences us to protect, support, and sometimes sacrifice for those we care about. Arya's eyes widened. Sacrifice? You mean giving up something valuable for another? Exactly. It can drive people to remarkable acts of kindness and bravery. A faint smile played on Arya's lips. That sounds beautiful, yet terrifying. We do not have such concepts in Zareth. Partnerships are formed based on compatibility and benefit. Thomas leaned forward, his voice gentle. Emotions add color to our lives. They make us human. But I understand they can be overwhelming. Arya glanced around, ensuring they were still alone. I must confess, Thomas, that I felt a strange pull since our first meeting. A desire to understand your ways, to feel what you feel. Thomas felt a warm surge of empathy. It's natural to be curious about the unknown. Emotions can be a bridge, not just between people, but between cultures. Their conversation was briefly interrupted by the sound of raised voices. The tension in the assembly hall was palpable as diplomats debated fiercely over resource allocation. The political strain between Earth and Zareth was evident, casting a shadow over their personal exchange. Perhaps we should return to the session, Thomas suggested. Arya shook her head, determination in her eyes. No, Thomas. I need to know more. How do humans express affection physically? Thomas felt a flush of warmth at the personal nature of the question, but decided to answer honestly. Physical expressions of affection, like hugging, holding hands, or kissing, are ways to convey love and comfort. They create a sense of closeness and intimacy. Arya's gaze was intense. And kissing? What does that signify? Thomas chuckled softly. A kiss can mean different things: a greeting, a sign of affection, or a deep emotional connection. It's a way to share a moment of intimacy and reinforce bonds. Arya looked thoughtful. In Zareth, such expressions would be seen as illogical. Yet, I find myself yearning to experience them, to understand what it means to truly connect. Thomas reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. Arya, exploring emotions is a journey. It's okay to feel uncertain. What's important is that you're open to learning. The ambient noise of the hall seemed to fade as Arya met his gaze, a newfound resolve in her eyes. Thank you, Thomas. Your openness means more than you know. Before they could continue, the assembly bell rang, signaling the next session. Thomas and Arya stood, ready to face the political challenges ahead, their bonds subtly strengthened by their exchange. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation as delegates from Earth and Zareth gathered for a critical negotiation session. The polished marble floors and towering columns bore silent witness to countless diplomatic battles, but today's meeting felt uniquely charged. Thomas Blake stood tall, his expression a mask of calm determination, while Arya sat beside him, her silver blue eyes reflecting a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. As the session commenced, tensions flared quickly. Zorak, a senior diplomat from Zareth, voiced his disdain for Earth's proposals, his deep voice resonating with authority. Earth's demands are unreasonable, he declared. Zareth cannot comply without compromising our own resources and stability. Thomas interjected smoothly, his tone respectful yet firm. We're not here to impose demands, but to find a fair solution that benefits all parties. Arya has a proposal that could bridge our differences. Arya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room's scrutiny. She began outlining her proposal, which balanced resource allocation fairly, taking into account the needs of both Earth and Zareth. Her voice, though soft, carried a clear conviction. By sharing technological advancements and implementing sustainable practices, we can ensure mutual prosperity without depleting our respective resources. Murmurs of skepticism rippled through the room. Zorak's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized Arya. Your ideas are noble, but are they practical? Your increasing emotional involvement with Earth compromises your judgment. Thomas could sense Arya's internal struggle. He stepped in to support her. Arya's insights are grounded in logical analysis and a genuine desire for equitable solutions. We must consider her perspective, not dismiss it based on unfounded fears. The debate raged on, with delegates from both sides voicing support and opposition. Amidst the heated discussions, Arya's calm and reasoned responses began to sway opinions. Slowly, allies emerged, recognizing the potential of her balanced approach. During a brief recess, Thomas and Arya retreated to a quiet corner. You're doing great, Thomas reassured her. Your proposal is gaining traction. Arya nodded, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Thank you, Thomas. But Zorak's right. My emotions are involved. I've never felt such a connection before. It's overwhelming. Thomas smiled gently. Emotions aren't a weakness, Arya. They're what make us strive for better solutions, what drive us to understand and collaborate. Embrace them. As they returned to the session, Zorak confronted Arya, his expression stern. Arya, you are straying from our cultural values. Emotional entanglements can cloud your judgment and undermine our position. Arya's eyes flashed with determination. Zorak, understanding emotions doesn't weaken our stance, it strengthens it. Empathy allows us to see beyond our immediate interests and work towards a sustainable future for all. The room fell silent as Zorak studied her, weighing her words. Finally, he stepped back, though his gaze remained wary. The session resumed, and the debate grew more intense. Arya's proposal faced rigorous scrutiny, but her composed responses and Thomas's unwavering support fortified their position. As the negotiation progressed, Arya's confidence grew. She deftly addressed concerns, citing examples of successful interplanetary collaborations and presenting data that underscored the feasibility of her plan. The turning point came when a previously skeptical delegate from Earth voiced his support. Arya's proposal offers a realistic path forward. We must embrace this opportunity for cooperation. The room's atmosphere shifted, with more delegates expressing tentative agreement. Sensing the momentum, Thomas seized the moment to reinforce their argument. This is a pivotal moment for us all. By adopting Area's balanced approach, we pave the way for a future where our worlds can thrive together. The assembly broke for a final recess before the vote. Thomas and Area walked together through the hall's serene garden, where exotic plants from various planets flourished. Arya turned to Thomas, her expression softening. "I couldn't have done this without you, Thomas. Your support means more than I can express." Thomas chuckled, a warmth in his eyes. "You did the hard part, Arya. You stood up for what you believed in, and you did it with grace and intelligence." They paused by a small fountain, the gentle sound of water providing a soothing backdrop. Arya hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas, I need to understand something. When you talk about love and connection, it's something we don't experience in the same way on Zareth. How do you know when it's real?" Thomas pondered for a moment before answering. "It's about feeling complete with someone, like finding a missing part of yourself. It's when their happiness becomes as important as your own." Arya's gaze held a mixture of curiosity and longing. "Thank you, Thomas. I think I'm beginning to understand." As they returned to the assembly, the final vote loomed. The tension was palpable, each delegate aware of the significance of their decision. When the results were announced, Arya's proposal was accepted by a narrow margin. The room erupted in a mix of relief and celebration. Thomas and Arya shared a moment of quiet triumph. "We did it," Thomas said, his voice filled with pride. Thomas and Arya stood side by side, their presence commanding attention as the assembly buzzed with nervous energy. The looming crisis threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of interstellar diplomacy, and everyone knew it. The air was thick with tension, and Thomas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Arya glanced at Thomas, her eyes a swirl of determination and uncertainty. "We need to present a united front," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. Thomas nodded. "We've come this far together. Let's see it through." They stepped forward, drawing the attention of the assembly. Thomas began, his voice firm and clear. "Esteemed delegates, we face a critical juncture. Our alliance is tested, and our response will define our future. We must act not out of fear, but with the wisdom and unity that brought us here." Arya took over seamlessly, her voice a melodic contrast to Thomas's. "Our proposal aims to balance resource allocation fairly, addressing the needs of all parties. It is a solution born from understanding and empathy, values we must uphold." Their speeches were met with mixed reaction. Some diplomats nodded in agreement, while others murmured discontent. Zorak, Arya's superior, stood up, his gaze fixed on her. "Arya, your approach diverges from our traditions. Emotions should not dictate our policies." Arya faced Zorak with unwavering resolve. "Respectfully, Zorak, it is precisely our rigid adherence to tradition that hinders progress. Emotions, when understood and channeled, can lead to profound insights and innovative solutions." The room fell silent. Thomas felt a surge of pride for Arya. She was stepping into her own, challenging the norms of her culture with grace and strength. He knew this was a pivotal moment for her and for their alliance. The assembly broke into smaller discussions, the tension momentarily diffused. Thomas and Arya moved to a quiet corner, needing a brief respite. "You handled that brilliantly," Thomas said, offering her a small smile. Arya sighed, a mix of relief and apprehension. "Thank you, Thomas. But Zorak's resistance is strong. He's a powerful figure on Zareth, and his influence cannot be underestimated." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this. You've already shown tremendous courage." As they talked, a group of diplomats approached, their expressions curious and cautious. "Thomas, Arya, may we have a word?" one of them asked. It was Kira, a diplomat from a neutral planet, known for her balanced perspective. "Of course," Thomas replied, gesturing for them to join. "We've been observing your interactions," Kira began. "It's clear you've developed a unique approach. Some of us believe it could be the key to resolving this crisis." How do you propose we integrate these emotional insights into our negotiations? Arya's eyes lit up with a newfound confidence. By focusing on shared values and mutual respect, emotions should guide us in understanding each other's needs and finding common ground. Kira nodded thoughtfully. It's a novel approach, one that requires trust and openness. Thomas added, and transparency. We must be willing to show vulnerability to foster genuine connections. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent call for all delegates to reconvene. The crisis had escalated, and a swift resolution was imperative. As they took their seats, Thomas and Arya exchanged a glance, steeling themselves for the challenge ahead. The assembly room was tense as the debate resumed. Voices clashed, each representative fiercely defending their position. Thomas and Arya's proposal was on the table, but it faced fierce opposition. Zorak was particularly vocal, his arguments sharp and uncompromising. Emotions are a weakness, Zorak declared. They cloud judgment and lead to instability. We cannot base our policies on such a fragile foundation. Arya stood, her voice calm yet resolute. Emotions are not a weakness, but a source of strength. They allow us to connect, to understand, and to innovate. We must evolve, or we risk stagnation. The room fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. Thomas felt the tension ease slightly as more delegates began to see the merit in their approach. It was a delicate balance, but progress was being made. Suddenly, a new issue arose. A rogue faction threatened to disrupt the negotiations, demanding immediate and drastic measures. The assembly erupted into chaos, with delegates shouting and tempers flaring. Thomas knew this was a critical moment. We need to act now, he said to Arya. If we lose control, everything we've worked for will be undone. Arya nodded, determination etched on her face. She stepped forward, raising her voice above the din. Enough, she commanded, her tone authoritative yet compassionate. We are here to find solutions, not to descend into chaos. Let us not forget our purpose. Her words had a calming effect, the room gradually quieting. Thomas joined her, his presence a steady anchor. We propose an emergency session to address these new threats. We must remain united in our goal of peace and cooperation. The proposal was accepted, and the assembly adjourned to prepare for the emergency session. As the room emptied, Thomas and Arya remained, their resolve unshaken. We did it, Arya said softly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. We did, Thomas agreed, feeling a profound connection with her. But the real challenge lies ahead. Are you ready? Arya's eyes gleamed with determination. Yes, Thomas. Together, we can face anything. The grand hall was filled with tension, the air heavy with the weight of impending decisions. Thomas Blake and Arya stood side by side, their presence a testament to the unique bond they had forged amidst the diplomatic turmoil. As the assembly prepared to vote on Arya's proposal, whispers of uncertainty and hope intertwined, creating a palpable sense of anticipation. Do you think they'll accept it? Arya asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her silvery eyes reflecting a mix of anxiety and determination. Thomas glanced at her, offering a reassuring smile. We've done everything we can. Now, it's up to them. The head of the assembly, a stern-faced representative from the planet Andoria, stepped forward to announce the results. The votes have been tallied. By a narrow margin, the proposal is accepted. A wave of relief washed over Thomas and Arya. The hall erupted in a blend of applause and murmurs, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in interstellar relations. Thomas turned to Arya, his expression warm. You did it, Arya. Your courage and insight have made a difference. Arya smiled, her eyes shimmering with a mix of pride and disbelief. We did it together, Thomas. Thank you for believing in me. As the assembly members began to disperse, Thomas and Arya found a quiet corner to reflect on the day's events. I can't believe it, Arya said, her voice filled with wonder. I've always followed the logical path, but today, I trusted something deeper. Thomas nodded. Sometimes, it's the heart that leads us to the right decisions, even when the mind isn't sure. Arya looked at him, her expression thoughtful. I have to return to Zareth soon. There's so much to share, so much to change. Our people need to understand that emotions aren't a weakness, but a strength. You'll be a great ambassador for that change, Thomas said. And remember, you're not alone in this. We'll continue our cultural exchange, no matter the distance. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar, authoritative voice. Zorak approached them, his demeanor slightly softened. Arya, Thomas, may I have a word? Thomas and Arya exchanged a glance before turning to Zorak. Of course, Arya said, her tone respectful yet firm. Zorak paused, his eyes shifting between them. I may not fully understand or agree with your methods, but today has shown me that there is value in what you've done. The proposal's acceptance is proof of that. You have my cautious support. Arya's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, Zorak. That means a lot. With a nod, Zorak left them, leaving Thomas and Arya to savor the moment. Looks like you're already making an impact, Thomas said with a grin. Arya laughed softly. It seems so. I just hope I can continue to do so back home. As the evening drew to a close, Thomas and Arya found themselves standing at the entrance of the Grand Hall. The soft glow of the interstellar lights bathed the corridor in a serene ambience. This might be goodbye for now, Arya said, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. But I feel like this is just the beginning of something much greater. Thomas reached out, gently squeezing her hand. We'll stay in touch. And who knows? Maybe our paths will cross sooner than we think. Arya smiled, her eyes reflecting a newfound confidence. Take care, Thomas. And thank you for everything. Safe travels, Arya, Thomas replied, watching as she walked away, her figure gracefully blending into the vibrant tapestry of diplomats and delegates. The next morning, Thomas sat in his quarters, reflecting on the whirlwind events of the past few days. A notification blinked on his communicator. It was a message from Arya, already back on Zareth. Thomas, the journey home was enlightening. I can't wait to share my experiences and begin the cultural shift we've discussed. This is just the start. Stay well, my friend. Thomas smiled, his heart warmed by the message. He replied, keep me updated, Arya. And remember, you have allies here. Together, we'll continue to build a bridge between our worlds. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was a young aide holding a small, sealed envelope. A message for you, sir. It just arrived from Zareth. Thomas took the envelope, curiosity piqued. As he opened it, he found a handwritten note from Arya. Thomas, during our journey, we received unexpected signals from a distant star system. It appears there's more to explore and understand. I think our work is far from over. Let's continue to unravel the mysteries of our galaxy, together. Thomas felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. The journey he had embarked on with Arya was indeed just beginning. With renewed determination, he prepared for the new challenges and adventures that lay ahead, confident that their combined efforts would bring about a brighter future for all.